Okay, so this morning's class is about the opening section of this week's Torah portions. It's a double Torah portion, Chukat and Bolak, and this week we'll be catching up and be in sync with our brothers and sisters in Israel who have been ahead of us a week ever since Pesach. That's because our second day of Pesach, or rather the last day of Pesach, was on Shabbos, and theirs was not, so they went a week ahead, and now we, this week, or as of next week, will be fully in sync again. All right, so we're going to look at the opening portion, the opening section, which deals with the laws of the Red Heifer. In Hebrew, the Torah Aduma. What's fascinating about this law, even before we get into the law, is where the Torah chooses to tell us about it. Let me explain what I mean. After last week's story, which is the story of Korach, the rebellion, which followed right after the incident of the spies, so that's when they were decreed to remain 40 years in the desert, right after the incident of the spies. So after the story of Korach, where God intervened, and we all know that dramatic story, God did not communicate a single command for 38 years. The next 38 years, during which they made 17 stops, 17 places in the desert, what they were doing was they were studying and so on, all that they'd been taught till now. "38 years later, the next event to occur is the death of Miriam, which is recorded right after the law of the Red Heifer. Now, the fact is that God had taught the laws of the Red Heifer way earlier, 38 years earlier. But the Torah only chooses to tell us about this law now, just before it records the death of Miriam, even though God had communicated it amongst many other laws, virtually all of them, 38 years earlier, with the giving of the Torah and the year that followed. So why was this not mentioned back then? Why is it only told now in the book of Numbers, just before the story of the death of Miriam? Rashi answers, the reason is, the Torah is telling us that in the same way that the Red Heifer brings atonement and cleansing, as we will presently briefly describe, so too, the passing of the righteous, the passing of the saintly, of the tzaddikim, like Miriam, their passing brings merit and atonement for the Jewish people. On many levels, I don't want to address this because it's not our subject, but in addition to just the mere fact that this righteous person leaves the world, so how does that bring atonement? Number one, the day of a person's passing, excuse me a second. Sorry, the day of anybody's passing is the culmination of their life's work. So the day of the passing of a tzaddik is the day where everything that they accomplished during their life comes together. So that brings tremendous blessing and atonement and cleansing. Moreover, additionally, as you might well appreciate, the day that the tzaddik passes humbles everybody. And in the mourning and in the grieving, it's all about teshuvah. It's all about self-reflection and cleansing, appreciating who this tzaddik was in our midst during their physical life, their effect on us, contemplating their lives, being affected by their lives, which means rectifying our own personal shortcomings. So in that sense, their passing brings atonement. In summary, this last point I said was because it elicits teshuvah. In fact, any death, the shiva period, by the mourners, is supposed to be a period of self-reflection and teshuvah. But in the case of an individual's death, that's for that particular family. When a leader, a tzaddik like Miriam or tzidkonit, like Miriam passes away, it's a time of teshuvah for everyone. All right, so that's the answer why the Torah, God, informs us of the laws of the Red Heifer only now, even though it was given 38 years prior. Now, as to the law itself. So the law of the Red Heifer basically is this. There are different levels of tumah, impurity. Now, what does it mean to be impure? Or rather, what are the ramifications? What's of being impure or pure? The answer is nowadays, nothing. But when the temple stood, this was a big part of life. Because if a person was ritually impure, that person could not enter the holy temple. That person could not eat of sacrificial meat. Or if the person was a kohen, could not eat of certain mandatory contributions, teruma, that the farmer, the Israelite farmer, was obligated to give to the kohen. So the bottom line is it doesn't apply nowadays in the practical sense because there's no temple and all of these laws are not observed and won't be till Mashiach comes, God willing, today. And then they become very relevant again. Mind you, there are many things we do, which I've spoken about in the past, not now, that we have been doing for 2,000 years as part of our everyday ritual for one objective, to ensure that when Mashiach arrives, we're all in the groove, ready to observe the laws because we're familiar with them. Just one example, which we're all familiar with, is the fact that a kohen, even nowadays for 2,000 years, has avoided going to a cemetery and being in contact with a dead body, only in order to prepare him when Mashiach comes to be in the groove and be familiar with his responsibilities, his restrictions and obligations. And there's many laws that everybody observes for the same reason. Close brackets. All to say that the laws of ritual purity and impurity apply when the temple stands. So as I started off saying, there are different levels of ritual impurity. Some things cause a person to be impure for a day. Some defiling agents, not even that. And one thing, actually more than one thing. There are some defiling agents that causes a person to be defiled for an entire week, a shiva. The most severe kind of impurity is death itself. That renders a person ritually impure for 7 days. And here we get the whole process by which a person, the individual, would attain ritual purity. And in summary, it's this. God says, a red heifer, that's a red female calf, that's 3 years old, that's capable of bearing offspring, pure, unblemished, never worked, purely red, even 2 black hairs would disqualify it. Never having worked, even placing a yoke on it without actually bearing the yoke or plowing a field would render it already invalid. So this is slaughtered, ritually slaughtered, shechted, not by the high priest, but the assistant to the high priest, and it's slaughtered outside Jerusalem. It's burnt. All of it's entirely burnt, reduced to ashes. And it's mixed with water from a spring. There's a red thread, dyed red. It comes from a certain worm, a certain dye that dyes it red, not blue. That's the tzitzis. This is red. And a hyssop, a kind of reed, that's all part of this mixture. It's all put in this earthenware bowl containing essentially the water and the ashes of the red heifer. It's a very mystical law, as you can appreciate. And it's sprinkled on the person who became ritually impure, or for that matter, objects. If a person dies in a closed building, everything under that roof becomes ritually impure. All vessels, all containers. If the person seeks to make them ritually pure, doesn't have to, but if he wants to, they too must be sprinkled with the ashes of the red heifer on the 3rd and 7th day after the impurity took place, or any time after that. There's no expiry date, but you got to wait after the impurity has been removed. 7-day process begins. Day 3, day 7, sprinkled with the ashes. Day 7, the person or the object immersed in a mikveh. Then at the end of day 7, on day 8, the person is now ritually pure and may enter the temple, may eat of sacrificial food. If he's a kohen or she's a kohen, a kehanas, she can eat of the sanctified food given to them by the Israelite farmer, and so on. That's clear. As you all know, this law is touted as the statute, the decree, Chukat Torah, the decree of the entire Torah. Decree implying beyond rationale. What's so beyond rationale about this law? In addition to everything I just told you, I will soon give kind of explanation for that. That's not what makes it so mystifying. What makes it so mystifying is that here the ashes, this mixture of the spring water and the ashes and that dyed crimson wool thread and the hyssop, this mixture is so potent that it brings purity to the most severe form of impurity, which is death. And yet, all the people involved in preparing this mixture, this potion, the one who slaughters, the one who burns it in the fire, the one who carries it, they all become impure. They all become impure, not to the same degree that would require to be sprinkled by the ashes of the red heifer, but they become impure to the degree that we have to go to a mikveh, immerse in the mikveh. So here's the paradox. Here is something that obviously is so powerful. It's the only thing, when Mashiach comes, friends, we're all going to undergo this process. Every single one of us, because we all want to go into the Holy Temple. So we're all going to go through the Shiva, this quarantine, kind of. Not that we are quarantined to our home, but we won't be able to go into mind you, the law is that if everybody's impure, the laws of impurity are suspended. So the truth is, when the temple is built, I would imagine we'll all be allowed access immediately because everybody's impure. But nonetheless, we will all undergo this purification process. So the paradox is, it's so powerful, this mixture, this mystical mixture of spring water and ashes of the red heifer, that it purifies the most severe, drastic form of impurity, and yet the ones involved in preparing it all contract impurity. It's a paradox, it's a contradiction. That's what makes it so mystical. Okay, So this was an overview, very general overview of the law of the red heifer. I haven't kept up with the news, but I do recall last year, or was it 2 years ago, an Israeli farmer announced that he had a cow that gave birth to a purely red female calf, a heifer. Could be still around. Anyway, that generated some, considerable excitement because, Mashiach comes, we got the red heifer, we're ready to go. So that's a general introduction into the an outline or some understanding of the law of the Parah Adumah, the red heifer. Now the question of the day. Here's the question of the day. It's always a question of the day. The Torah says, God spoke to Moses and Aaron saying, this is the law of the Torah which God has commanded, that you communicate to the people. Tell the people they should bring to you, who's the you? Moishe Rabbeinu. A red heifer, and so on, all of the laws I went on to describe. What's the question? Why are they bringing it to you? This is the law of the red heifer. I missed an important detail, and that is as follows. So that's the question, all right? The question is, why are they bringing it to you? The basic to you, to Moshe Rabbeinu. The basic answer is the following, friends. This was a detail which I'll share with you now because it's going to answer why they brought the finished product to Moses. Answer. The ashes were divided into 3 parts. 3 containers. Wasn't that much. When you reduce the calf to ashes, can't imagine it was, the volume was very, very great. So, what was divided into 3 parts? What 3 parts? One of them was camped on the mountain of Olives, simply as a perpetual reminder. Wrong. The part that was kept on the mountain of Olives, that was used, friends, for 2 things, according to, I'm combining 2 commentaries here, 2 sources. One source, the future priest that would prepare the red heifer, the next one, if it was required, would be sprinkled from some of these ashes. Moreover, some of these ashes of the original red heifer prepared by Moshe Rabbeinu are mixed into the subsequent red heifers. 9 which were made over the course of history, and we'll go into more detail in a moment. So just get that this clear. The original ashes, red heifer made by Moshe Rabbeinu, is divided into 3 parts. 1, to be used to purify future Kohanim who are going to make future as necessary red heifers, and they're going to mix in some of the ashes from the original Parah Adumah that's kept on the mountain of Olives. Then there's another jar that's kept just as you're about to enter into the temple. It's an area called the Chayil. Before you enter the temple proper, on the Temple Mount, there was this stone jar. Everybody saw it as a perpetual reminder of this mitzvah. And a third, inside the temple proper, used to purify people or objects that needed to be purified. So we understand now already why they had to bring it to Moshe Rabbeinu, because his original ashes were integral in all future red heifers. To purify the people making it, they actually took some of his ashes and mixed it in the new red heifer. As I mentioned to you, 9 were made over the totality of history. That's why he says, bring it to you, because your ashes, the one that you make, that you are going to oversee, made under your watch, Moshe Rabbeinu, under your supervision, under your inspired leadership, there forever. Those ashes will be integral to all future red heifers. Good. That's the answer why it says, bring to you. But the question is, of all the mitzvahs in the Torah, why is this the one that physically remains forever? The one that Moshe Rabbeinu made and is part of all future red heifers, continuing the link, but more than just the link, the original ashes actually mixed into them. Of all the 613 commandments, this one has to have a physical presence forever until Mashiach comes. Why? That's today's question. We clear on the question? Yeah. God commanded 612 other commandments. We do not find that any of the others should have this property, that it's yours and it's around forever till Mashiach comes. And the 10th red heifer, which Mashiach will make, they'll mix the ashes, a little bit of Moishe Rabbeinu's original red heifer, which is under the temple grounds, kept there, waiting for that moment to be used. Our question is, why this mitzvah? Okay, friends, let's begin the answer. Beautiful, beautiful answer. And a profound and beautiful lesson, instruction, guidance, and inspiration for each and every one of us. Ready for it? Good. So here we go. First question is, to answer this, it's a strange thing. How did that happen? Okay. It's a strange thing that the red heifer is female, because the vast majority of offerings are male. In fact, all communal offerings are male. Individual offerings can be male or female. But community offerings, and this is a communal offering, they're all male. This is female. Why? So Rashi explains, with respect to this detail and many others, it's all an atonement for the golden calf. Here's I'm going to share with you the details of the law of the red heifer and how they match and atone for the sin of the golden calf. Here we go. First of all, God says the people have to make this golden calf, not you. I'm sorry, the red heifer, but not you. Just like the golden calf was made by the people. Why a calf? So that this calf, the red heifer, the mother, that's why the female now should, as the mothers do, clean up the child that has despoiled his or herself. So the red heifer, this female calf, is atoning for the sin of the golden calf, the child, as it were. Clear? It has to be unblemished, I told you. Why? Because its function is to restore the Jewish people to its former unblemished state. No yoke can be placed on it to atone for the fact that they had thrown off the yoke of God. Who's to prepare it? Not Aaron, but Aaron's son, Elazar, because Aaron had played a part in the golden calf. Much to his chagrin, tried to delay them, but at the end of the day, he was part of it. It shall be burned. Like Moses, when he came down from the mountain, burned the golden calf, the red heifer is burned. And then he should take cedar wood, hyssop, and crimson wool. I didn't mention the cedar wood. Cedar wood, hyssop, and the dyed crimson wool. These three entities corresponding to the 3,000 men who were executed for sinning in the golden calf. Moreover, it's a message of repentance. The cedar is tall and haughty. The hyssop bends. The wool is dyed by a simple dye of a simple worm. The haughty should humble themselves. Then the Torah said, place it for a keepsake. It should always be a perpetual reminder, as I just told you. The one that was placed as you enter the temple complex was there as a perpetual reminder, because the sin of the golden calf, till Mashiach comes, is forever. We're still paying for it, because every sin really perpetuates it. So that goes on for generations. So too, the Red Heifer shall be for generations. And here, I'm going to explain the paradox that anybody that carried it and touched it and was involved in it became impure, because just as the calf defiled the people, so too there's this element in the Red Heifer that causes defilement. So it's a constant reminder pointing to this is the antidote to the golden calf. And finally, how is atonement achieved? By having the ashes sprinkled. Well, if you read again the story, what Moses did after the golden calf, he ground it and he sprinkled the people with its ashes. It's mirrored again here by being sprinkled with the ashes of the Red Heifer. All to say that what? That the Red Heifer is an atonement for the golden calf. Now, what's the connection? Going deeper. Getting to the essence of what the Red Heifer is all about. Friends, had the people not sinned with the golden calf, there would be no death in the world. When God created the first human beings, the original game plan was no death. In fact, no aging. Aging is a corruption of the human condition. It's an instruction in the genes to get old. In theory, the body has the ability to regenerate itself, but the instruction is not to regenerate, but compromise a little bit. It's called the aging gene, and science today is entertaining the notion of let's identify it and neutralize it, which is wonderful because, science is all part of, it's God's world, God's nature, the messianic ideal. And death, we don't believe in death. It's an aberration, not supposed to be, and won't be in the end. So when we got the Torah, that was an opportunity right then and there for the utopia, the messianic era, Moishe Rabbeinu, the Mashiach, going to Israel forever. It did not happen because it didn't take long, and the golden calf. So the golden calf brought death to the world. And when we say death, all sin is really death. What is death? Death is the absence of life. And what's sin? That's what sin is. Sin is we cut ourselves off from the ultimate source of life, which is God. We can walk around physically alive, but we're really dead. In the words of our sages, the wicked, even when they're alive, they're dead. Because if you're not connected to God, there's physical existence, but there's no life. So the golden calf brought death to the world again. And because there's death, so there's the need for purity. So the Paradum of the Red Heifer, which brings purity to death, it mirrors, and it's the antidote to the golden calf, which brought death once again to the world. Are we clear? Is that clear? Yes, nod your head. This way means no, this way means yes. Which way are we going to go? Okay,
Can you just clarify there was
some of you are opting to be neutral.
There was death in the world before.
Okay. So, the Red Heifer, yeah. See, when you speak, you get onto the screen. That's what happens. Okay, not hearing me. So the Red Heifer is the antidote to what? To the golden calf?
Hello?
Because the Red Heifer is, just one second, I'm going to make this. Is this it? No.
Rabbi New?
I want to make it, look at the speaker's view. Anyway, shy. It is what it is. Okay, let's continue. I want to wrap this up because it's so beautiful and deep. So what do you just hear now? You heard now that why is it that the red heifer is all about rectifying the golden calf? Because the golden calf brings death, and the red heifer is the atonement, the antidote to death. Now this is going to explain, we're now going to share with you a quote from the great codifier, the Rambam, and a little question on what he says. And in the context of that which we are discussing now, it will be resolved. Okay, so bear with me, a kind of a little digression, and then come back to our subject, deepening it as a result of our digression, of our question. What's the digression? Here's the quote from Maimonides from the Rambam. This is the laws of the red heifer, end of chapter 3. Says the Rambam, here, quote directly from the book. 9 red heifers were offered from the time that they were commanded to fulfill this mitzvah until the time when the temple was destroyed a second time. That was the end of the red heifers. No temple, no need for this. The first was brought by Moses, our teacher. The second was brought by Ezra. It lasted 1,000 years. Ezra was the one that was the leader of the Jewish people after the destruction of the first temple, and instrumental in the building of the second temple. He was on par with Moses, one of the greatest leaders of all time, and he's known as Ezra the scribe. He did the second one. Then there were another seven that were prepared throughout the duration of the second temple, a total of 9. And the 10th, says the Rambam, will be brought by Melech HaMashiach, the King Mashiach, Meheira Yigole, may he speedily be revealed. Now I think we once spoke about this. All of a sudden we're getting a prayer in the middle of the Rambam. And not just a prayer. When Mashiach comes soon, he goes, Amen King Hirotze, in the middle of a halacha. That's for another time. And moreover, it doesn't say may he come soon. May be revealed soon. Meheira Yigole. I'll just tell you this, friends, because the Rambam was the Mashiach of his generation. In every generation there's someone worthy to be Mashiach. No, and it's not me. So he says, Meheira Yigole. I don't know if he meant this consciously or not, but reveal, because there's him. Anyway, that's an aside. Let's not get distracted. What's the question of the digression? The question I want to ask, or I want to share with you is, why is the Rambam giving us a history lesson here? This is a book of laws, cut and dry laws, friends. So why are you being told how many there were, and there'll be a 10th one? It's not a law, it's a piece of history. And you should know, Mashiach will come. Of course we know Mashiach will come. There'll be the red heifer. Like all the laws will be reinstated. Do we have to be told it's going to be number 10? I mean, it's just completely left field, it appears. Totally inappropriate to the entire work of the Rambam, which is all cut and dry laws. But the answer is, the Rambam is telling us, Kindalach, the whole point of the red heifer is, in the end, to do away with death altogether. Not just clean it up when it happens. There was death, you got impure, now we're going to clean you up. But the real essence of it is, it's the antidote to death, period. We'll soon tell you how that happens, spiritually, right now. But he wants to tell us that till Mashiach comes, it hasn't completed its job. Because there's still death. It'll be the 10th one. And 10, we all know, means the perfect number. Why? As you all know, because the world is created through 10 utterances and the 10 attributes. And you're also familiar with the 10 spheres. So it'll be at the end of the process. 10th one will complete and culminate what the red heifer is all about. Because when Mashiach comes, that will be the culmination of all of our work to conquer death once and for all. So that's why he says, when he talks about the laws of the red heifer, he's got to say, I know it's not finished yet. There were 9, but the 10th will culminate the whole objective and essence and power and potency of the red heifer, which Moishe Rabbeinu began. It'll culminate with the 10th. And then the golden calf and its aftermath, which is death, will forever be not just conquered but transformed. And now, having said all of this, we'll understand why, on a deeper level, they had to bring the red heifer to Moshe Rabbeinu, and it's V'yikroy Elecha, God says to the people, they bring it to you, and all red heifers have to have the stamp, the participation, the ashes of the original heifer of Moshe Rabbeinu, of all the mitzvahs in the Torah. Why is this the one that his physical presence must be there? The ashes he prepared under his watch. Through his instruction, every red heifer thereafter had to be part of that. Why? Answer. Because it's Moshe Rabbeinu alone who embodies, who is the answer to death, who embodies eternity, even physically. How so? Listen to this quote, my friends. Listen to this quote from the Talmud. The Talmud says this: Moshe Rabbeinu did not die. Talmud tractate Soita, which everybody has been learning recently, between Pesach and Shavuos, page 13b. You can look it up. It's the end of the bottom of the page. The Gemara brings the proof text, not just interesting proof text. Here it is. What does it mean he didn't die? It means he didn't die like everybody else dies. And where do we see this? Because it is written that when he was on the mountain for 40 days, it says, Vayihi Shom, and he was there with God. And when he died, it says, Vayom Hashom, he died there. Now this word there in both places is superfluous. He was with God is enough. There with God, he died is enough. We're told which on the mountain. Why there? The word Shom, there, written when he was on the mountain, and with God getting the Torah. And there, when he died, the Torah puts in these two words when they don't have to be there to tell us, compare the two, Kindalach. Just like when he went up, this is the Talmud, just like when he went up for 40 days, he didn't die, even though he didn't eat and drink for 40 days. So too, when he went up to Mount Nevoy, there, he didn't die either. Not like everybody else, at least. So what does it mean he didn't die? The answer is, all the righteous, my friends, in fact, all people, the soul's forever. We're not talking the soul forever. That's obvious. But for everybody else, the soul is forever where? Up there in heaven. But Moshe Rabbeinu, listen to the Talmud's quote. Just like on Mount Sinai, he was Sinai. He was not dead, but stood there serving God and his people. So too now, after his physical death, he remains here serving God and his people. Embodied in the Moses of the next generation. For in every generation, there is a leader who is in fact the extension of Moses. That's what it says in the Zohar. So what do I mean that he didn't die? What does the Talmud mean he didn't die physically? It means that he continues to be present in the physical world, working and serving for the people, with the people and in the people. All to say that Moishe Rabbeinu embodies eternity. Another quote from our sages, whatever Moishe Rabbeinu does is forever. The Mishkan that he built is still around, friends. It's under the temple ground. That's, by the way, one of the reasons why he couldn't bring the people into the land. Because if he would have brought them into the land, it'd be irreversible. And God knew the people would not deserve remaining there. So if he brings them in and the temple is destroyed, it would mean the destruction of the people. Exile wouldn't be an option. There's no going out. What Moshe Rabbeinu does is forever. So therefore he doesn't bring them in, so the option of exile becomes possible. It's one of the deep reasons. That's why he doesn't go in. Why isn't he buried in Israel? Is he staying with his people? A, the people that died in the desert, and B, the Jews that are going to be exiled, you and I, and he's coming back with us. And he's ever present in all the great Jewish leaders, the Moseses of their respective generations. So we're getting the point here. Death is the opposite of eternity. Moshe Rabbeinu was the answer to death because he is nitzchi. He's eternal. And this is manifest in the physical ashes that are still around, that was used, mixed in, and purified, as I told you, the kohanim involved in all subsequent red heifers. So why of all, let's answer our question now. Why of all of the mitzvahs that they must bring the ashes to you? Because this is the one mitzvah that attacks the very root of evil. Sin, death, decay. And Moshe Rabbeinu, he is the one who embodies eternity, impacted, present, felt, engaged, not just up there, here, physically, in terms of the physical impact, the physical engagement, as represented and manifest in the physical ashes that he made that remain forever. And the 10th one, the Mashiach will make, will be mixed again with the ashes that Moshe Rabbeinu began. It's one long leadership. Mashiach is the Moses of the ultimate Moses, if you like. So that answers that question. We've answered that question. Why they have to bring the ashes to Moshe. And why it's only this mitzvah of all 612. Because this is the mitzvah that cuts to the core from the very beginning. Expelled from Eden, so it all went awry, is in the Garden of Eden, and death. And we had a chance at Sinai, and we lost it. By God's divine plan, that's true. But right there is the Red Heifer, Moshe Rabbeinu, who sets in motion the process of total healing. Healing to the point that death is conquered forever. It's all in connection with Moshe Rabbeinu. Expressed in this law, which is why it's called Zois Chukas HaTorah. This is the law or the statute of the entire Torah. Hello, the 612 mitzvahs, commandments. Why this one? Because this one addresses the foundation. The greatest achievement of all. The transformation of death into life. Return to Eden. Return to paradise. But not the superficial, childlike, textureless, testedless, no test, paradise of Adam and Eve, but a rich, deep paradise, one that each and every Jew ever who was born or died has played an indispensable role in creating. That's the paradise we're going back to, the one that you and I make. You and I make plugged into the Moses, and the Moses within, there's a spark of Moses within all of us that brings about this great transformation, which is the whole purpose of life. God says, I made a world. I made you with a Yetzer Hara. You are going to bring death and destruction, and you are going to transform it and make it life and peace on a level that my world was not even before you were born, before man was created, even as I made it at the outset. As beautiful as it was, you are going to take it to a whole new level, and that will happen because you will experience death, and in the end you will transform it. And that's all through Moses. Now the practical friends, let's bring it down. So what are you supposed to do? First, we've got to be connected to the Moses of the generation, to the Moses within. That's number one. But now some more detail and practicality. Why is it that Moishe Rabbeinu is eternal? Every soul is eternal. But what's the secret to Moishe Rabbeinu that his eternity is present in the world? Emes. What's emes? What's true? Truth is not just in heaven, but here on earth. Why Moishe Rabbeinu? The answer, friends, is because he was selfless. Selfless. And his whole being is to serve his people, even to the point after the golden calf, he says to God, he threatens God. He says, if you don't forgive them, I'm finished. Take me out of your Torah. I'm finished with you. That's what he says. Take me out of your Torah. Absolute selflessness. That's the key to eternity. That's why everything he does is forever. Because he's attached to God in the deepest way. Why? Because his ego wasn't in the way. Like God's forever, he's forever here in this world because of his utter transparency and selflessness. Now let's look now in detail here for a moment. The ashes of Moses. Number one, they're forever. And number two, you take a bit of it and every subsequent red heifer has to be mixed with it. What does this mean to you and I spiritually? It means, friends, practically speaking, every morning when we daven, the davening, our prayer, the Shema, the Amidah that we say, is to be the moment of my ashes of Moses, a declaration of my absolute devotion to God and readiness to sacrifice. That's what we're supposed to be thinking when you say the Shema. As instructed in the Machzor Yom Kippur, when we say Shema before, at the climactic moment of Ne'ilah. That's the ashes. Now the trick is, not the trick, the whole challenge is, take that inspiration, take that feeling and sprinkle it, mix it into every moment of your life. That it permeate as a kind of an underpinning to all the decisions and crossroads we're going to face in the course of a day. What should guide me is selflessness, his will, ashes. Quite simply, ashes. Reduced to ashes is humility. A symbol of humility. Are we clear? These two things. There's the ashes, and then there's mixing of the ashes. The ashes is the conscious declaration and dedication and readiness and willingness to die if we have to. But even more than that, to live with that sense of devotion. That's a declaration you've got to make. That's the ashes in the container. But then after a morning prayer, we close the book, it's all over. We're back to the same old, miserable me. No. Now we've got to take those ashes, those life-giving ashes, and sprinkle them and spread them out like Moses' original one in every encounter of our life. That's the whole mission. Until the 10th and final red heifer, when Mashiach comes, the mission is complete, and death is indeed swallowed up and transformed forever. So the key to it all is, again, all of these words, we shouldn't get lost. The key to it all is the Moses within. We all carry a spark of Moses within. And what is that? That is truth, emes, and humility, total surrender, total devotion, total transparency. We all have that ability. It's the core and essence of who we are. tap into that, therein lies the antidote to death. Therein lies its very transformation. And that's what we're engaged in since the dawn of creation. This has been the mission, especially since the giving of the Torah and the mitzvah of the Red Heifer. And as I said, and we're all praying and hoping, and we're sure and confident, we stand on the threshold of the realization of this great singular mission. And Mashiach will be revealed in the words of the Rambam, Mehira Yigola, Amen, Kain Yehi Ratzon. Thank you for listening. I'm going to unmute you, and you can make a comment, talk to each other.